in a moment.
Hi, everyone. I'm Josh Earl.
And I'm Will Garcia.
And together we're the Hoops Guys. And we were unable to do our normal scheduled Fridays awesome news this week due to a little thing called the holidays.
Yeah,
but
that Christmas thing.
We didn't want to leave you guys out in the cold.
Oh, I see what you did there.
So we're doing a special version of the Friday awesome news, only this time it's going to be called the Han or Holidays Awesome News. Will, I'm going to let you mention the first thing on the docket because I'm sure you are ecstatic about it.
Yeah, Smoothgate. Josh Smith is no longer a Detroit Piston. They waived it, which they use a thing called the stretch provision. Josh, you're making a video on that. It should be coming out pretty soon over the course of the week. And what that did was allow them to stretch their cap hit of his remaining $27 million over the next 5 seasons to just $5.4 million per year. So they're going to be paying him $5.4 million over the next 5 years to not play for them. But honestly, that doesn't sound like that bad of a deal.
Nope. I know there's a lot of people that have been kind of shitting on this.
Yeah.
Saying like, hey, they totally screwed this up and they should have either done it earlier before the season even started, which there is something to say about that, or they should have waited and exhausted all options before the trade deadline. But there's a thing called sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah.
And I love this move because it's a big FU to the sunk cost fallacy.
Yes.
Where a lot of businesses, and basketball is no different, they allow themselves to get tied into the costs that they've already sunk into an asset, or in this case, Josh Smith. So we already gave him this contract. We kind of got to get something of value for him because we've already put $27 million into it already, and we have 27 left.
Right.
But the smart business person understands that sunk costs are irrelevant, and what you should really focus on is, does it make sense right now?
Yep.
And Stan Van Gundy and Tom Gores together came to the realization that, hey, at this point, it doesn't make sense to pay Josh Smith another $27 million after this year.
Nope. Absolutely, I totally agree because, he is giving them a negative value.
Yeah.
So, really, it doesn't matter what you're paying him. If you're giving him the max or if you're paying him the minimum, you're losing out by having him on your team in the current situation that he was in. Are there other situations? Because we'll talk about this right now. Well, actually, we'll talk a bit more about what Detroit was thinking. Now he's in Houston. Might he be successful there? I don't think so, but it's possible. There might be some roles, or some systems, or some coaches who might be able to connect with him and help him out. But it was pretty obvious here that no matter how much you're paying him, that contract you're going to have to pay for it anyway. So that's kind of irrelevant. And really, you're bleeding out by letting this guy on your team in that circumstance.
Yeah, and Stan Van Gundy made some very excellent points as to why the timing was the way it was. They did, as Woj noted, they did get trade offers in the offseason, primarily from Sacramento, but that offer centered on Jason Thompson and Carl Landry's contracts, which are also long-term contracts. They're not very attractive trade assets, so it's not like Detroit could then turn around and flip those guys for anything better. And to Stan Van Gundy's credit, and I really appreciate this actually, personally I would have done it in the offseason because I know that I would not want to work with Josh Smith.
Yeah.
But Stan Van Gundy, he wanted to wait because he felt you need to know your team and you have to see how they play together before you start making changes. And from that standpoint, I totally understand going into the season and like, okay, well, let's see if there's any way to salvage this in the first place. I can appreciate that. I get that. And the potential Sacramento deal, you're bringing on two other guys who wouldn't necessarily fit with your future plans, and you probably have to stretch them anyway.
Yeah.
So
didn't Sacramento want to pick?
I wouldn't be surprised if they did. I've heard that it was just those two guys for Josh, but I wouldn't be surprised if they asked for a pick too. Regardless, there weren't other offers out there, guys. Really.
Yeah.
Like I know everyone seems to think that for every potential deal, all 29 other teams are interested. That's not the case. It really doesn't happen that way that often. Sacramento is really the only team interested in Josh Smith at that cost, and they weren't really offering much in return that the Pistons wanted. So
yeah, the
trade route didn't really make sense.
Yep, absolutely agreed. And they just had to get this guy off of their team. It's not good for your player development with guys like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who I'm kind of lukewarm on. Josh and I were a bit higher on him a couple of years ago.
Yes.
But guys like Andre Drummond, Greg Monroe's out of there. But
this deal could, and I stress could, partially be a thing to help make it easier for them to sway Greg to stay in the offseason if that is what they're trying to do.
Yep.
Because they're opening up more playing time for him. They're opening up a bigger offensive role for him because Josh Smith was the number one guy for the Pistons usage-wise, which also makes sense. Yeah, which also makes sense. You take Josh Smith away, and then you start getting more opportunities for Andre Drummond, for Greg Monroe, for KCP, for Spencer Dinwiddie, whom we love.
Yeah.
And there's part of the reason why that Ewing theory exists. And guess what? It's not because those star players are actually bad. Not even close. What it is you're taking possessions that would otherwise be contained to just one player, and you're redistributing them across the team, which generally means more ball movement, and thus generally, and I stress generally, it means more open looks, and open looks are better than contested post-ups and ISOs for your star players.
Yep.
And so far, that seems to be the case. The Pistons are moving the ball pretty well after the move, and I believe they're 2-0 right now, Will? They've only played 2 games since, right? Yeah.
Yep.
So, I don't think that's going to continue. They're not going to run the rest of the season and get into the playoffs. But, it is more promising, and you're getting a better look at guys like Drummond, Monroe, KCP, and Dinwiddie going forward.
Yep, I absolutely agree. Speaking of the playoffs, a team that is, I'm going to eat some words here, definitely going to be in the playoffs. I was a little unsure at the beginning of the year, but yeah, they're in it. Houston Rockets are the team that wound up picking up Josh Smith. I really, really don't like this fit. For anybody involved.
Yeah, agreed.
You want to give your reasons first?
I don't think Josh Smith is the elevate guy for them. He might bring some additional rebounding and shot blocking, but they have Dwight Howard already. It's not a major need for them there. What they need is more floor spacing, and Josh doesn't provide that. And in his first game as a Rocket, he took more shots than James Harden or Dwight Howard.
Do we know how many of those were threes?
I don't remember off the top of my head. I know he took 21.
You can talk about why you don't like it, and I'm going to look that up.
Yeah, okay. And you're talking about a player who isn't necessarily a great fit with what the Rockets are trying to do. Josh Smith has had only one season in his career where he kind of curtailed the affinity for long mid-range 2s and 3s, which he's terrible from.
Yep.
That's one season out of like a decade plus of time in the NBA. I think that's more the exception that proves the rule than necessarily like, see, he can do it. We just got to reach him, So I don't buy into the idea that McHale might be able to turn him around. I do think Houston's going to be fine. He's not going to derail Houston's chances of making the playoffs or anything. But I don't think and when you factor in that he's only making, I think they use their biannual exception on him. That's given the cost, in a vacuum, it was probably a good deal for the Rockets. But from a on the court kind of
I get what you're getting
players doesn't make sense to me.
Yep. So I just looked it up right quick, and in his 2 games with the Rockets, Josh Smith is averaging a 3.5 per game, which is a 3.5 too many. But to be fair, they have eliminated the mid-range shots pretty much entirely, according to Basketball Reference, which is cool. And they're mostly being replaced, and again, 2-game sample size, with shots within 10 feet, which kind of better, but it kind of depends. The difference between an 8-foot shot and like a 13-foot shot in terms of percentages, it's about the same. So we'll have to wait and see. The thing that I don't like is that you mentioned this is a team that needs floor spacing. One, Josh Smith thinks he can provide that, and Morey might be some 180 IQ having genius, but I don't think that anyone is going to convince Josh Smith that he can't shoot. And the way that their offensive system is sort of ran, they have had no problem with guys who aren't great three-point shooters taking threes. Donatas Motiejunas, for example, isn't really all that great of a shooter, but he's still taking multiple threes per game for that team. So there's a precedent of I should say, of players stretch fours for that team who might not be great at it, and that's sort of the way that their offense is predicated on. When so much of your offense is based on getting to the basket and trying to draw fouls, that's going to open things up essentially for your other players to be near the perimeter. I mean, where else are they going to be, at the basket? No, they'd be stupid. So I think Josh Smith could easily wind up in a situation that does not play to his skill set at all, yet totally plays to what he thinks his skill set is, and just kind of winds up crapping the bed a little bit.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
There's only one more thing I want to throw in on this whole thing, but it goes back to the Detroit side. One of the things that often gets glossed over is how moves impact your perception around the league with players, with agents. Because as an organization, you have to deal with those agents and those players and other players who have opinions on how you handled it down the line.
Yep.
And one of the things that I think they did really well here is, instead of just trying to work out a lump sum buyout, which maybe they tried, but Josh wasn't going to give up. He wasn't going to take a major haircut on his contract going forward.
Right.
And it benefits the Pistons, I think, in perception with agents and players long term, because what they did is they didn't badmouth Josh at all. They just said, it doesn't work for either party, so we're going to waive him, use the stretch provision. He's still going to get paid all of his money. He's not going to lose a cent. He's going to get paid all of his money, and we're giving him the opportunity to go to a team he wants to go to, because we know nobody's going to pick him off the waiver wire. So in essence, instead of trying to trade him to a team maybe he doesn't want to go to, or trying to cost him money in a buyout, they're able to say, and the perception that's kind of in the ether now is, hey, they helped Josh out a little bit. Sure, they cut him, they waived him, but they did it in a way that helps Josh out too. And I think that's something that can be valuable. You can't really measure it. It's kind of like goodwill. It's intangible. But I think that's something that could help the Pistons down the road. And on top of it, it also kind of set a precedent with the current Pistons roster that Stan Van Gundy's the man here.
Yeah.
He's the man, okay? If he can go to the owner and drop the hammer on our highest paid player, it can happen to you too. So now
if I'm Brandon
really
Jennings, I am like shaking in my socks every time I go to shoot an off-balance contested 32-footer.
Yeah, now there is a real legitimate sense of accountability there, and you wouldn't necessarily feel like, you know what, he's the coach. Most of the time, the coach is going to be gone before I'm gone, blah, blah, blah. No, all the players in that locker room right now know, like, well, shit, I shouldn't piss Stan off, So I think there's a lot of long-term elements of this that are a little more intangible, but I think definitely were beneficial for the Pistons, too.
Yep. So speaking of beneficial, P3, the Peak Performance Project, let me get my words in the right order. It's a training center and research lab in Santa Barbara, California. Sports Illustrated ran a couple articles on them recently, and holy cow, they seem beneficial.
Yeah, so I highly recommend you guys check out the articles from Chris Ballard, who, by the way, Chris Ballard is one of the best writers in basketball.
Yep.
Amazing.
Link in the description box with all the articles, as always.
Yes, he's a little more kind of narrative-based than, say, like Zach Lowe or some of the guys who do a little more frequent stuff. He's more in the vein of like Jonathan Abrams.
Yep.
But great stuff, and he did a great look at P3. And if you're unfamiliar with P3, it's a training center and research lab, like Will said, that uses force plates and about 10 motion capture cameras to kind of come up with a 3D model of a player's skeletal structure as they go through functional movement exercises in order to see, how a player's body is moving, where it generates its power, where there might be asymmetries that need to be addressed, and ultimately where the skeletal structure might be at risk for injury. So this is something that could help reduce uncertainty about injury risk, which can be, as you can imagine, can be very beneficial.
Yep, absolutely, because injuries suck.
Yeah.
So in these articles, it's pretty amazing. Some players who have used P3, in addition to baseball and MLS, Major League Soccer players, Dwight Howard, Andrew Wiggins, Al Jefferson, Kyle Korver, basically the entirety of the Utah Jazz, and a bunch of the prospects in the 2014 draft. Nice Kirilenko jersey. A bunch of the prospects in the draft, they got to come out and do it as well. I think it was in the Chicago Combine. People from the Combine.
They had a section at the pre-draft Combine where they had it kind of cordoned off, and players were kind of tested using this stuff. And once again, it's not just a way to kind of gauge injury risk. This is also a way to help you figure out the best way to train and become better and reduce those asymmetries and inefficiencies in certain areas so that you can play at your best.
Yeah, why do you think Kyle Korver is having a career year at age 33?
Yeah.
That's not supposed to happen, but with good training and when you can find out, what ways you're using your body inefficiently, and particularly what they do that's really cool is that they have trainers on staff who can actually help you correct it, which is kind of important. It's one thing to know a problem, it's another thing to solve it. And they seem to be in the business of doing both, and it seems to be pretty effective. A lot of their players who have come through there are having very, very good years, and have had, especially recently, I've sort of had some career renaissance things happen. So, yeah, I'm pretty hyped on this. This is actually pretty cool. The one ethical question that it sort of raised is, okay, well, who gets to know this data?
Yeah. Who owns this data? Is it kind of like medical record information where, that kind of belongs to the athlete and the doctor, or is it something that teams can have access to? And, there exists a potential for future litigation around this, similar from Eddie Curry kind of taking the Bulls almost to court. I don't know if it actually went all the way to court, but when they tried to do genetic testing on Eddie Curry because he showed a potential heart problem, which he did have under some tests that the Bulls ran. Then Eddie didn't feel that comfortable about it, and it's understandable. It's this very interesting gray area that we don't currently have ironed out yet, and there's that element of this. But ultimately, P3 I think is super helpful, super awesome, just flat out awesome and interesting.
Yeah.
And there are other companies that do somewhat similar stuff. Catapult Sports, for instance, has kind of similar stuff that they're working on. But one of the really significant advantages that P3 has is they've done these assessments on like over 100 NBA players, 120 Major League Baseball players, and over 100 other pro and Olympic athletes. So they have a database of numbers through which they can give you context for your performance. So it's not just, well, you are showing this in your lateral movement. It's, this is how you compare to other players at your position in your sport in terms of lateral movement and how we can fix it,
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's pretty cool. So not everything that's out of the box is very effective, at least my opinion, and I think Josh is going to share it with me on this one. The Bucks are using and I'm going to use finger quotes because facial coding expert to help in personnel decisions. This is wonky, dude. So in May, the Bucks hired Dan Hill, a facial coding expert who reads the faces of college prospects and NBA players to determine if they have the right emotional attitudes to help the Bucks.
Yeah. Generally, I'm always prone to give credit to organizations that are willing to look in unique places for advantages. And I don't fault them for this, but it makes no applicable sense to me. I may be wrong. I'm inclined to think I'm not, obviously, but I may be wrong. But there's some people who are better in the know that tend to agree with me. But David Morway, the Bucks' assistant general manager, he had a couple of quotes where he said, we spend quite a lot of time evaluating the players as basketball players and analytically, but the really difficult part of the puzzle is the psychological side of it, and not only psychological, but character and personality issues, and also team chemistry issues.
Absolutely, I totally agree.
And yes, I absolutely agree too. And we know several teams are using sports psychologists, whether they're on staff or just helping out in a consulting basis for draft workouts and stuff. Some teams use psychological tests as part of their draft process. I don't know if we've discussed it in the past on this channel. I'm very dubious of those things because, at least in my experience, I can take the same personality test from the perspective of, okay, this is me when I'm working, and I'm going to get exactly different results when I take it, and I'm like, this is me at home, relaxing.
Yeah.
And that's my problem with it, is it's context and environment specific.
It doesn't take into account multiple selves.
Exactly. And, it's like any personality test, too. Like, say, for instance, you took which Ninja Turtle am I? Which I've totally done.
Yeah.
But guess what? Nobody really is strictly the leader or the smart one or the rough one or the funny one. We all have elements of our personality that either come to light more prominently in certain areas or certain environments and contexts, or, generally speaking, we're just more of an amalgamation of those things than any single one.
It's sort of like the purr of psychology.
Yeah.
In a way, because it's so reductionist. And this seems like it's even worse in terms of like, oh, this guy looks this way after he gets a rebound, or this guy looks this way when they're down by 5, or this guy looks this way after his teammate misses a layup. Like, okay, what? So, until you can prove to me that you have found meaningful correlations between objective, and the keyword here, objective measures of different facial expressions or different expressions or different, like objectively defined character attributes during basketball, and I can't really think of a good word for it, but you'd have to find an objective way to determine it. And winning and certain performance types and different outcomes, then you have my attention. But until you have that, you're just kind of doing like junk.
Well, and part of this too is you have to factor in that there's a big difference between kind of laboratory conditions where, okay, we've got everything else kind of controlled for variable-wise, so we know that this is what's driving it. You can't say that in an actual game.
No, you can't.
For instance, Dan Hill worked with the Bucks team psychologist, Ramel Smith, watching a ton of video on all the draft prospects and watching video categorizing their facial expressions through video. And I'm a video guy. I work for Synergy Sports. I teach a course online about how to use Synergy Sports and video for basketball purposes. So I'm a video guy. But there are a lot of things you can't do with video. You have to be there in person to get the context. And going through draft prospects video, game video, and trying to identify their facial expressions and then trying to code that to what they're thinking in their head, no.
Yeah, and it varies so much contextually too. Tyson Chandler on the Knicks last year looks way different facial expression wise than him on the Mavericks this year. Why? Because he probably doesn't want to choke himself.
Yeah, and it has nothing to do with Tyson being a different person.
It has everything to do with that team being terrible and this team being good. Or like if you're like, I don't know, Kyle Anderson looks all upset at Zach LaVine. Maybe Zach LaVine, like, I don't know, like, who knows? Maybe they got into it in practice the day before or something stupid, or maybe the coach did something. Like, you weren't there.
Maybe Zach LaVine farted just then.
Yeah.
And Kyle Anderson was like, dude, It doesn't mean he hates him as a teammate or anything. It just means, damn, man.
Yeah, and people have done very well in basketball with a wide variety of personality types and a wide variety of expressions on the court. Look at my favorite team ever, and I know, keyword there being favorite, and not necessarily best, but that 2004 Pistons championship team. I'm a Detroit guy-ish. That's what got me into basketball. And they had Chauncey Billups, who was like really calm and collected, ice water. They had Rasheed Wallace, who was the opposite of that. And they had Ben Wallace, who, kind of scares me.
Yeah.
And they had Tayshaun Prince, who just basically didn't talk.
Yeah.
And that was the Detroit Pistons.
And
that was their personality.
Rip was kind of like Tayshaun and Chauncey, and like he didn't really talk, and he also had kind of that calm stoicism that Chauncey.
Yeah. So if you're gonna say like the Dan Hill says in this article, like, I was able to find the heart of a champion. Like, no, those were 5 champions, and they all have very different, quote, hearts, end quote. That's just stupid.
Yeah,
and Martha Farah,
yes,
or Farah, or however the heck you pronounce it, I don't know, but she's like the LeBron James of neuroscience. If you have never read it, she has a really cool piece. You can read it for free, called Poverty, Privilege, and Brain Development, and it is really sad, but it's also really important and really well written and very well argued. But anyway, that's kind of an aside, but she is like really, really highly renowned neuroscientist. She said, She was skeptical about its applications in sports because she said, it's not easy to get good evidence because a player's performance and teamwork are complex outcomes, and the teams are not run like clinical trials, with coaches and managers blind to the facial coding findings and so forth. So it's hard to know whether the system works well, gives some marginal benefit, or does nothing at all.
Yeah.
And she knows more about neuroscience than I ever will, so I'm going to take her word on it.
Yeah, so it's not just Will and I ranting against this. There's a leading cognitive neuroscientist.
The person who basically created neuroethics is like, I'm skeptical. And skeptical, that's a nice word for me.
Yeah. So props to at least being willing to look outside the box, Bucks. But I wouldn't hire this guy long term and make significant choices personnel-wise based on his recommendations.
Yeah. If Justice Winslow or Carl Towns makes a stink face, I wouldn't let that hit their draft stock too much.
Yeah.
Speaking of stocks, I am buying full stock on what Seth Partnow was saying about Sport VU data. Looks pretty awesome. So why don't you tell the people a bit about that one?
Yeah, so Sport View and the NBA have this tendency to kind of quietly release new elements of the Sports View stuff on the NBA stat side.
Yep.
That it's only once some of the Twitterati in basketball kind of take notice and let people know that people realize what's going on. But they release something new that's pretty interesting, and it's motion tracking based movement animations. So you get to see all 5 players of each team on the court as they move through the actual play. So you get a better sense of you get a better visual sense of what exactly went on in that play instead of just trying to rely on, say, play-by-play or something like that. And it's really, really cool stuff. Highly recommend you check it out. Seth had a couple of good quotes in there. One was, while it's not strictly an analytics tool, these animations have incredible potential for assisting with the communication and interpretation of all forms of analysis, whether metric or scouting based, which communication is essential.
Yes.
You never will boil basketball down to one number, but let's say you somehow magically did boil it down to one number.
John Hollinger would be very jealous.
It's 42. And you say, okay, well, you know what? I solved basketball. Now I just got to get the coach and the players and the owner and the GM to agree. If you can't communicate that well to them that they buy into it, guess what? Even though you solved the game, it doesn't matter because it's not going to be applied.
Nope.
So,
you have to make it actionable.
Exactly, and you have to take data and turn it into knowledge.
Yep.
And the only way you do that is by taking the data, determining the context, and communicating that in order to make it actionable data, aka knowledge.
Yep.
And anything that helps with that is a major step in the right direction, and these movement animations should help a lot, I think.
Yeah. One thing that they showed in there, and maybe you could answer this question because I'm not sure. When it comes to them looking at distance between defenders on shooters, are they using that measuring the player's feet, or are they using that measuring because if I'm leading forward,
I don't know if they're using feet or kind of center of the body or just closest.
Right, because if
I don't know how they break that down specifically in the sport data.
Had a thing in there where it was like, well, this shot was actually wide open. It looked contested, but it was actually wide open because there was 6 feet of separation. Yeah. Well, which to be fair, based on the camera angle, because it was on the opposing baseline, you couldn't really tell if the hand was in the face or not. But if they're measuring 6 feet away based on just foot distance, well, if I'm leading forward,
Yeah,
And
you can
I can get my hand
close
in
the
your
gap a
face
little
with
bit
my
more. Yeah.
Trevor Ariza 7-foot wingspan. I can still get a hand in your face pretty good. But if they're only using if you're using center of body, I don't know. One thing that I have always wanted to see SportsView do, and they probably will do it at some point, is to measure what percentage of the player's face winds up getting contested.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That'd be kind of cool if I could actually they blocked 80% of
Process
your,
defense. Yeah.
you know,
How many times a game and how closely and the efficiency of not only trying to block the shot, which let's be honest, people, that's actually not the best way to do it.
no.
If you do block the shot, then yeah, that's awesome because you negate the thing. But most of the time, you either get pump faked and they have a driving lane now, or you can get pump faked into a foul, or you miss the block and it just accounts to a run out, which does impact the shooter's look at the basket. But if you're just following process defense and you block their field of vision of the basket, you have a pretty good shot at reducing the efficiency of that shot, because a large part of it, if you're a shooter, you'll understand this. Most shooters aren't just kind of flinging it up there generally at the rim. They're usually targeting a spot on the rim.
Yep.
Usually one of the areas where the actual net is looped in.
Yep.
So if you can disrupt their vision of that, you can throw them off a little bit.
Yep, and a little bit is all you need to make a miss.
Exactly.
So, speaking of miss, the Raptors had a little bit of a missed opportunity with a trade for Kyle Lowry, I think it was last season. But as Christopher Reyna from Real GM notes, but it probably was for the better looking back on things.
Yeah, so there was a deal being discussed between the Raptors and the Knicks, and this was post-Bargnani deal that would have sent Kyle Lowry to the Knicks for, I think, a package that included Meta, World Peace, Shumpert, and the 2018 first or something.
Yep.
And it was pretty much kind of honed down towards almost agreed upon, and James Dolan kind of got cold feet given that the media and fan perception was that, and I think most people would agree, that Masai Ujiri fleeced the Knicks in the two trades that he did with them. And so Dolan kind of pulled out at the last minute. And, of course, Kyle Lowry stayed with the Raptors and played really damn well. Yeah. And now the Raptors are one of the best teams in the East.
And Kyle Lowry's probably going to be an all-star this year.
Yes, and should have been one last year.
Yep.
And while the article itself isn't anything major to write home about, it does bring up an interesting topic, which is sometimes it's the move that you don't make that makes you a better team.
Absolutely. Totally agree with that. And it's kind of funny. That would have been them fleecing Masai back. But this sort of shows me that they were willing to put this on the table and that Dolan was the person who sort of wrote this one off. I think that, and this is just my personal opinion, Masai Ujiri is definitely one of the better GMs in basketball, but I don't think he's the, quote, messiah. I'm not walking around, hailing the earth the guy walks on to the same extent that some other people who follow basketball do. A lot of this Raptors team was Colangelo.
All of it, other than the guys they got for Rudy Gay.
Yep. And I think he's not bad. He's really good.
Not even slightly. He's definitely like a top 10 GM in the league. Yeah.
Absolutely. He's very, very good at getting what he wants. Very good at. He is a master of trading for what he wants. Essentially, the Kyle Lowry contract extension is brilliant. Or no, re-signing, my bad, is a brilliant contract that they basically robbed the guy, especially considering the new CBA stuff going on. 4 years, 48 with a player option. So, amazing deal there. The Rudy Gay trade was very, very well done. In Denver, the Carmelo Anthony trade was also very well done. I can give them props on that. Not a big fan of the JaVale McGee, Danilo Gallinari, Wilson Chandler re-signings, but given the way that Denver is ran, I can sort of understand that. But really, let's not make it out like this Toronto team became a contender overnight. You know, we know that this was a very, very solid team even last year, and once they removed Rudy Gay, you know, let's be honest, but anytime you can remove a player who is playing like Rudy Gay did in Toronto, it's going to help you out quite a bit. And there's just a very solid core. The way this team is built makes a bunch of sense. They're probably overplaying. They're actually definitely playing better than they're probably going to end the year on. I don't expect them to continue to be this good just because over an 82-game season, this would be a near historic team, and I don't think they have quite the talent or cohesion or coaching for that.
Yeah, plus I believe they've had one of the easiest, if not the easiest, schedules so far in the league. So they'll definitely come back. They'll regress to the mean a little bit, but that mean is still better than pretty much most teams in the East. They're easily upper echelon in the East, and they could actually, if they were in the West, they would be, even after regressing to the mean, they'd still be in the battle for playoff spots in the West.
Oh, yeah.
They are a really good team. Don't think that we're saying they're not. Just
it's a 55-win mean.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So.
That they're going to be regressing to. But I think that Ujiri's role in building that team, massively overstated. Colangelo's role is being totally overlooked.
Yeah. That's why I've said for a while that Masai is really good at breaking a team down. He really is. He, like Will noted, you know, the trades, he does a phenomenal job. Part of it is he fleeced New York and Sacramento, so, you know, he's not really going against the Danny Ainges of the world or, you know,
R.C. Buford,
Johnny Nelsons, you know, R.C. Bufords. He hasn't really met even the Presties. You know, he hasn't really messed around too much with those guys.
To be fair, why should you?
Well, I know that's part of the thing, though. It's kind of like shot selection, but only for a GM. Like, hey, you know, if I could get a deal done that I like with a team that I know maybe isn't, either they don't have the best leverage trade-wise, or I can maybe
outsmart them.
Yeah, I'll let you say that. you can you know, get an advantage on. Then yeah, that totally is the sign of a good GM. And like we mentioned, he's a very good GM, one of the best. But we still haven't seen Masai actually build a team yet. Yep. It's still not there because every single player that's in the core of the Raptors, Kyle Lowry was acquired by Brian Colangelo. DeMar DeRozan was drafted by Brian Colangelo. Jonas Valanciunas, Terrence Ross, same thing. Amira Johnson was acquired by Brian Colangelo. You know, the only guys are really the bench guys that Masai brought in. And to his credit, that they're great fits.
Yep.
But, you know, once again, we'll have to wait a little bit longer to see really how good Masai actually is.
Bingo.
But,
Johnny on the spot.
Yeah. But speaking of really good, you know, and potentially great stuff, I won't go into any of the specific articles because it's a time thing, but in the doc, check out this link from StephenLeBron.com, and it's the best of 2014. 100 writers wrote in to him with their what they felt were their best articles for the year, and there's some really, really good stuff in there.
Yeah.
Definitely highly recommend checking that out. And then I want to leave you guys with another great link that I think everybody should check out. It's wonderfully done, and it's you might have seen it if you were watching the game on Christmas. TNT did a video segment on Craig Sager and his battle with leukemia, and it's a very well handled, well done video. And Craig's battle is very inspiring and emotional, and you don't usually think that much about sideline reporters being an important, integral part of the NBA. Craig Sager is.
Yeah.
And I highly recommend watching this video.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think that wraps it up.
Yarp.
Yeah, okay. So if you enjoyed this video or podcast, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, thumbs down. If you felt any way about any of these articles, or maybe you have some ideas for articles we should put in on Friday, definitely leave a comment below. If you like the Google Hangout format, it helps us out a lot in editing and transcoding, because rendering an hour or an hour and a half of video takes forever, and this does not. So if you like the live format, put that in the description or give a comment with that, or maybe even say what time works best for you. We can try to be accommodating, but, life and stuff. Additionally, if you did enjoy this, think about sharing it on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, whatever the cool kids are using these days. Probably some new Silicon Valley startup app, and that's the rage right now. I don't know. And subscribe to be notified of all our future videos. Thanks a bunch for watching. Hope you had a Merry Christmas, and hope you do have a Happy New Year.
Take care, everyone, and have a safe and happy New Year.
Yeah, safe is important. We want you in one piece.
Yes.